Good evening, students. Today we will be discussing the Thomas Jefferson Presidency. If you would, please take notes in your composition book in the following three-part graphic organizer. The first part, the election of 1800, is going to focus on the top four columns. The second part, the personal life of Thomas Jefferson, will focus on the middle part, view of the country's future, personal style, size of government, and government debt. And the last part, the Judiciary Act through Marbury versus Madison, will be the last portion of the lecture. All notes should go into your composition book. All notes should be thorough. Thank you very much. Please enjoy. As noted, and as should be titled, tonight's homework is the Jeffersonian era, or the Jefferson era, and we're going to talk about Thomas Jefferson taking office as the third president of the United States. We're going to analyze the election of the 1800 and discuss the importance of Marbury versus Madison in his presidency as well. Please record these vocabulary terms in your vocabulary section. First off, analyze, something that we've talked about a lot in class, to examine carefully and in detail. A radical, who's a person who holds an extreme political view on one side or the other. An inaugural. An inaugural refers to the beginning of something, especially a presidency, which we'll be talking about today. Now, what we already know about American history is that according to the Constitution, in presidential elections, the man receiving the second highest number of votes in a presidential election became the vice president. This served perfectly fine during the first three terms of the presidency, with the slight hiccup of electing political rivals with Adams and Jefferson. However, this whole thing would become a huge problem during the Jeffersonian presidency. Now, as we remember, John Adams won the presidency in 1796 after Washington stepped down. Now, he was well-fitting and well-deserving of the presidency, but he was not a very good president because he was not able to deal with the politics of the office, and essentially. His vice president was his close friend, yet personal, or a close friend but political enemy, Thomas Jefferson, and these two as president and vice president clashed continuously throughout the presidency of Adams over things like war with France and the Alien and Sedition Acts. While Adams won no friends with the Alien and Sedition Acts, the thing that essentially cost him the presidency and cost him a second term was his unwillingness to go to war with France. The reason this was more upsetting than the Alien and Sedition Acts is because this alienated his own Federalist Party, especially Alexander Hamilton, who worked very hard to make sure Adams was not reelected to the presidency. During the election of 1800, we would see John Adams running against his Democratic-Republican vice president, Thomas Jefferson. Now, the Democratic-Republicans had been on the back seat up until this particular point. What they felt they were doing was saving the nation from monarchy and oppression. They believed that the president was becoming too powerful, and they sought to limit that power. They also believed that the Alien and Sedition Acts violated the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and they sought to get rid of those as well. Now, on the flip side of the political spectrum, you had the Federalists, who thought that they were saving the nation from radicals, people who held extreme political views, especially left-wing radicals, as they saw what happened with the French Revolution, where a nation essentially devolved into chaos after ousting their king, which was once a very stable country, had become absolutely embroiled in insanity up to this point until it was taken over by a dictator, Napoleon Bonaparte. Now, with the election of 1800 was the first weird election, definitely not the last weird election in the United States history, but Thomas Jefferson was kind of the clear winner. He earned 73 electoral votes, and Adams only earned 65. The problem happened that his vice president-to-be, Aaron Burr, also earned 73 electoral votes. Now, this tied him for the presidency. So he was not supposed to earn those votes. He was supposed to be the vice president, but now we had the president and vice president tied for the presidency. Now, according to the Constitution, in the case of a tie, the House of Representatives would vote on the president and pick between Burr and Jefferson. Now, Federalists at this point still held the majority in the House of Representatives, and they would essentially decide the winner. Some Federalists did not like Jefferson. They felt that he had too much power and too much influence, and so they decided to back Burr. What spun it in Jefferson's favor, however, was again Alexander Hamilton. Hamilton considered Burr an unreliable man and somebody not worthy of the office of president. He detested Aaron Burr all the way back from the Revolutionary Age. And although he was not in the House of Representatives or representing anybody at the particular time, he still held sway and influence over members of the House of Representatives. The House of Representatives would vote 35 times, and on the 36th time, the ballots came back in favor of Thomas Jefferson. Aaron Burr would take the vice presidency and Jefferson would become the president. This, however, led to a very infamous moment in American history because Burr would never quite forget the insults of Alexander Hamilton. And essentially, after limiting his ability to become governor of New York, would challenge Hamilton to a duel in which he kills him. After the 1800 election, however, the 12th Amendment is passed, which essentially changes the Constitution to say that there will be a separate ballot for both the president and the vice president as it is today, and that they would in fact run as a ticket. We will now focus on the second part of the notes, the way that Jefferson would run the country. So please look at that portion of your notes and be ready to discuss his philosophies. Jefferson wanted to change the politics of Washington already. And essentially he wanted to make this country more cohesive. And in his inaugural address as the president, he tries to ease these political quarrels, saying, "Let us then, fellow citizens, unite with one heart and one mind. Every difference of opinion is not a difference of principle. We are all Republicans. We are all Federalists." Now, it was very nice for Jefferson to say this. However, his governing style would be very one-sided. It's important to remember that Thomas Jefferson was a farmer. He was a planter. He had vast holdings of tobacco and wheat, and he wanted America to do that. Jefferson believed that the country as large as the United States had enough land for everybody, and that people should not crowd into small cities like Europe, but they should spread throughout the country, and each person in America should have their own small independent farm. Now, you can see as this could be beneficial for somebody who is a farmer. He would stand to make quite a bit of money if everybody else was farming as well. Jefferson also did not want to behave like a politician. He would behave like himself, as if he was still at his home in Monticello. He did not ride in fancy carriages to his inauguration. In fact, he just walked to the inauguration. He would answer his own door in his own dressing gown, which is a nightgown, instead of having a slave or a doorman answer it for him. While Jefferson spoke of bipartisanship, he did not govern in that fashion. He governed strictly as a Democratic Republican and ended many Federalist programs. He directed Congress to eliminate the Alien and Sedition Act. Also, he got rid of the unpopular whiskey tax, along with numerous other federal taxes. In order to basically make up for the tax revenue that he lost, he reduced the size of the federal government, cutting federal employees, and also gutting the Navy and the military while he was at it. With Alexander Hamilton as the Secretary of the Treasury, he had spoke often of the benefits of a public debt. He believed that if the government owned people money, that they would make sure that it was run properly. However, Jefferson opposed the public debt, and he would use the revenues from tariffs to reduce the amount of money owed by the government and continue to keep government spending at a bare minimum. This was more than anything Jefferson's legacy, to keep the government as small as possible, but we will soon see that a small government is not necessarily a good thing, as we saw previously with the Articles of the Confederation. We are now entering the last portion of the note-taking, the Judiciary Act of 1801 through Marbury versus Madison. The most lasting legacy of the Adams presidency was the Judiciary Act of 1801, in which John Adams appointed as many judges as possible as he was leaving office, including amongst them a new Supreme Court Chief Justice by the name of John Marshall, who would rule for over 30 years. This act ensured that at least one branch of government would stay in the hands of the Federalists, and would limit Jefferson's control over the judicial branch. John Marshall would serve as the Supreme Court Justice for over 30 years and would put an indelible mark upon the office. And he would strengthen the federal court and the power and the authority of the federal court through something we call judicial review. The idea of judicial review came out of the Marbury versus Madison court case. Essentially, William Marbury was one of the last-minute judges that was appointed by John Adams. However, when James Madison took over as Secretary of State, he refused to give Marbury his job or his appointment, and Marbury sued in federal court. Now, John Marshall, the new Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, ruled that Marbury had no grounds to sue because the law that he was suing on was unconstitutional. This decision, however, established the idea of judicial review, that the court could in fact oversee laws and decide whether they were in fact constitutional or not. This power would become integral in the growth of our nation, essentially making it the fact that the Supreme Court would be the last say in all lawmaking in this country, and would be able to decide on the constitutionality of laws as we have seen it done so many times afterwards. Please finish up your notes by once again reflecting on the election of 1800, the way that Jefferson chose to run the government, and also the Judiciary Act and Marbury versus Madison. Thank you very much.